You know what's interesting about cutting expenses? Most people approach it like punishment. They make a list, cross out everything fun, eat ramen for 3 months, cancel Netflix, stop seeing friends, and basically turn their life into a joyless spreadsheet until they can't take it anymore and blow all their savings on something stupid just to feel human again. But there's another way. A way where you spend less without feeling broke, where frugality doesn't mean misery, and where saving money actually becomes a source of pride instead of shame. I'm talking about how Jewish families have traditionally cut expenses, not through deprivation, but through intentionality. And the difference between those two things is everything. See, Jewish culture has this unique relationship with money where spending less isn't about being cheap. It's about being wise. It's not about what you can't afford. It's about what you choose not to waste. And that shift in perspective, that tiny mental reframe, changes the entire emotional experience of saving money. Growing up, I watched my grandmother clip coupons like it was a competitive sport. But she wasn't poor. She owned her house outright. She had savings. She traveled. She just refused to pay full price for something when a little planning could get it cheaper. She'd say paying retail is for people who don't respect their time enough to think ahead, which sounded harsh until I realized she was right. Spending wisely wasn't about lacking money, it was about respecting it. So today, I want to walk you through 5 ways Jewish families traditionally cut expenses without that horrible feeling of deprivation that makes most budgets fail. These aren't extreme couponing hacks or live-in-a-van strategies. These are practical, psychologically sound approaches that let you save serious money while still enjoying your life. And the best part, once you understand the mindset, it doesn't feel like sacrifice anymore. It feels like winning. Quick question. Where are you watching this from? I'm curious what expenses are hitting hardest in your city right now. Is it housing, food, transportation? Drop your city below because I genuinely want to know what you're dealing with and how these strategies might help. Let me start with something that sounds simple but completely changes how you spend money. In Jewish financial thinking, there's this concept of value per use, not value per dollar. What does that mean? Most people look at a price tag and decide if something is expensive or cheap based on that number alone. $50 feels like a lot. $10 feels like a bargain. But Jewish tradition flips that. It asks how many times will I use this, and what does it cost per use over its lifetime? My uncle bought a winter coat for $300. And my cousin freaked out. $300 for a coat? That's insane. But my uncle smiled and said, I'll wear this coat every day for 10 years. That's 3 cents per wear. Your $40 coat will fall apart in 1 season. Who's really being smart here? And he was right. That coat lasted 15 years. Meanwhile, my cousin bought 5 cheap coats in the same period and spent way more. This mindset applies to everything. Kitchen tools, furniture, shoes, appliances, even subscriptions. Jewish families tend to buy quality less often rather than cheap frequently. A good knife that lasts 20 years instead of replacing dull ones every year. Real wood furniture instead of particle board that breaks when you move. Leather shoes that can be resoled instead of sneakers that fall apart. It feels expensive up front, but it's dramatically cheaper over time. And here's the psychological magic. When you buy something quality that lasts, you don't feel poor. You feel smart. You feel like you made a good decision. There's pride in it. Versus buying cheap and replacing constantly, which just reminds you over and over that your stuff breaks and you can't afford better. Same amount of money spent, completely different emotional experience. Here's another one that most people miss entirely. Jewish expense cutting focuses on eliminating invisible waste, not visible pleasure. What's the difference? Visible pleasure is the nice dinner out, the vacation, the concert tickets, things you actually enjoy and remember. Invisible waste is the subscription you forgot you have, the food rotting in your fridge, the late fees, the interest charges, the convenience purchases that add 0 value to your life. Most budget advice tells you to cut the fun stuff first. Skip the coffee, don't go out, cancel your hobbies. And that's why people hate budgeting, because it feels like cutting out everything that makes life worth living. But the Jewish approach says, cut the waste, keep the joy. My friend Sarah told me her grandmother kept a notebook. Not a budget spreadsheet, just a little notebook where she wrote down every single expense for 1 month. Not to judge herself, just to see where money actually went. And what she found was shocking. She wasn't overspending on restaurants or entertainment. She was hemorrhaging money on convenience, buying lunch because she didn't plan breakfast, paying for express shipping because she ordered late, replacing things she already owned but couldn't find, buying ingredients for recipes she never made. 40% of her spending was pure waste that added nothing to her quality of life. So she didn't cut her budget, she cut her chaos. She meal planned on Sundays, she organized her pantry so she knew what she had, she bought gifts a week early instead of overnight shipping them, she unsubscribed from marketing emails that triggered impulse purchases. Her spending dropped by a third, and she felt like her life got easier, not harder, because she wasn't constantly scrambling and making expensive mistakes. That's the key. Jewish expense cutting isn't about suffering, it's about efficiency. You're not depriving yourself, you're removing the friction that costs you money without giving you anything back. Now let's talk about something that might make you uncomfortable, but it's incredibly powerful. The Jewish approach to cutting expenses involves serious negotiation and zero shame about asking for better prices. In mainstream culture, especially American culture, there's this weird idea that negotiating is rude or cheap or awkward. You pay the sticker price, and that's that. But in Jewish tradition, negotiating isn't offensive. It's expected. It's respectful even, because it shows you're engaged in thinking, not just passively accepting whatever you're told. My dad negotiated everything. Not aggressively, not rudely, just calmly. He'd ask, is this your best price? Or is there any flexibility here? Or what can you do for me? And you know what? It worked more often than it didn't. He got discounts on appliances, better rates on insurance, upgraded hotel rooms, reduced medical bills, you name it. Not because he was pushy, but because he asked when most people don't. There's a Jewish saying, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. So you might as well ask. And here's what people don't realize. Businesses have flexibility built in. Sales reps have discretion. Customer service has retention budgets. Medical billing offices have payment plans and reductions. But they're not going to offer them unless you ask. They're hoping you just pay and move on. I know someone who negotiated his cable bill down $40 a month just by calling and saying, I'm thinking of canceling. What can you offer me to stay? $40 times 12 months is $480 a year for a 10-minute phone call. That's not being cheap, that's being smart. And the beautiful thing about this approach is it doesn't make you feel poor. It makes you feel powerful. You're not begging, you're negotiating. You're not desperate, you're informed. And when you save money through your own effort and skill, that feels completely different than just going without because you can't afford it. Here's something deeply embedded in Jewish financial culture that modern people have completely lost: the art of communal sharing and borrowing. In Jewish communities, there's this understanding that not everyone needs to own everything. You borrow, you lend, you share resources within your community without weird capitalism guilt or transactional scorekeeping. Need a pressure washer once a year? Borrow your neighbor's. Have a fancy mixer you use once a month? Lend it when someone needs it. Someone's making a big purchase? Pool money with relatives and share ownership. This isn't about being unable to afford things. It's about recognizing that ownership has costs: storage, maintenance, depreciation, and sometimes access is better than ownership. I grew up watching this constantly. My mom's friend had a popcorn machine, another had a karaoke system, another had camping gear. They just rotated based on who needed what. Nobody felt poor for not owning everything. They felt smart for having access to everything without the cost and clutter. Compare that to modern American culture where everyone buys their own leaf blower they use twice a year, their own ladder collecting dust in the garage, their own specialty kitchen equipment for that one recipe. You're spending thousands of dollars on things that sit unused 99% of the time, just to avoid the minor awkwardness of asking to borrow. Jewish communities figured out centuries ago that coordinated sharing makes everyone richer with less individual expense. And it builds relationships in the process. When you borrow something, you have a conversation, you connect, you help each other. It's financial efficiency and social bonding at the same time. Last one, and this might be the most psychologically important. Jewish expense cutting reframes frugality as generosity delayed. What does that mean? In Jewish tradition, saving money isn't about hoarding or being stingy. It's about creating future capacity to help others. You save now so you can give later. You live below your means so you can support your kids, help family in crisis, donate to causes, host people in need. This completely changes the emotional experience of cutting expenses, because you're not sacrificing for nothing, you're preparing to be generous. My grandfather lived modestly his whole life, not because he was broke, because he wanted a cushion to help people when they needed it. And he did, constantly. Paid for a cousin's medical bills, helped neighbors with rent, funded kids through college. When he passed, we found records of all the quiet ways he'd supported people for decades. And the thing is, living modestly never bothered him, because it was connected to a higher purpose. He wasn't cheap, he was strategic. He was building the capacity to be the person people could count on. And there's deep psychological satisfaction in that. When you cut expenses just to cut expenses, it feels empty. But when you cut expenses to build your ability to help, to give, to support, suddenly every dollar saved has meaning. You're not being poor, you're being purposeful. That shift matters enormously because it sustains the behavior long term. You don't burn out on frugality when frugality is connected to values bigger than yourself. So here's the core truth. Jewish strategies for cutting expenses aren't about deprivation. They're about intentionality. They're about buying quality over quantity, eliminating waste while keeping joy, negotiating without shame, sharing within community, and connecting frugality to generosity. And when you approach saving money this way, it doesn't feel like poverty. It feels like power. You're not going without, you're choosing wisely. You're not cheap, you're strategic. And that makes all the difference in whether you can sustain it. Now, I want you to comment below with this phrase, value per use, because that concept alone will change how you think about every purchase. Just those 3 words. Drop them in the comments, and let's see who really understands this principle. Subscribe to this channel right now, because the financial wisdom we're sharing here isn't coming from gurus selling courses. It's coming from generations of people who actually lived these principles and built real wealth through them. And hit that like button to tell the algorithm that this kind of content matters. What I'm covering in the next video is something most people get completely backwards about money, and once you see it correctly, your entire financial life shifts. You're going to want to be here for it, so make sure you're subscribed, because this next one changes everything.